Good morning, afternoon, evening. Hope everybody is well. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. I do look at all comments, and I always say that. But please subscribe and tell your friends to subscribe. Hopefully, you get something out of it. If you can teach somebody else something that you've learned, then that's wonderful. So today I'm going to talk, and I didn't really know what I was going to talk about. And then a bunch of stuff came to me. So this will be like a collection of stuff, including Elon Musk and Trump and their appeal bonds. We're going to talk about MMTLP, my arbitration, Dennis Neal. We're going to talk a little bit about Alpine and a whole bunch of that stuff. But before, of course, I get started, it's not legal advice. This is certainly not legal advice. So do your own whatever. Don't rely upon this. And but hopefully it will stimulate you, maybe help you think about things in a different way, and maybe set you on your own journey. So before, of course, I get started, and I'm going to kind of like jump around because there's a bunch of topics I wanted to talk about. Before I wanted to get started, I was going to talk about a few things. My dad told me to invest in bonds, so I bought 100 copies of Live and Let Die. I think you have to be old enough to understand that joke. What's the biggest difference between investment bonds and men? Investment bonds mature. And last but not least, why did the painter being not the house painter, but the portrait painter, why did the portrait painter claim that he was jailed? What was the reason he gave? Well, he claimed that he was framed. Anyway, bunch of stuff to want to talk about. So first of all, AST and EQ, and this is an MMTLP note. So people have been talking about EQ like it just existed. I know that when I looked at AST probably January of 2023, they were already EQ. So to the extent there's any confusion that EQ recently purchased AST, that's not correct. That happened quite some time ago. Okay, next. Both Elon Musk and Tesla and Donald Trump are pursuing or contemplating pursuing appeals, and both have also asserted that if they both have also asserted that if they appeal, maybe I could do it a little higher, like that, maybe, or like that. Both have asserted that they want to stop the enforcement of those uh, appeals. And the way you could do that is the other side could agree to that. Of course, that's not going to happen, or they could seek to get a bond. If they seek to get a bond, it has to be, they have to pay for the bond, which is generally 1% to 2% of the face amount of the bond. The bond itself would be the amount that was in dispute that was awarded to one side or that was the benefit. So in the Trump case, including interest, somewhere around $450 million and accruing interest at about 87,000 a day, I believe. And in the Elon Musk case, it's unclear what that amount would be. The amount of the potential amount could be as much as 55 billion, could be probably as low as 2.5 billion, likely to be somewhere between that. So as to those sums, so in the Trump case, 450 million, he might have to pay 1%, which would be 4.5 million, if my math is correct, up to 2%. In Musk and Tesla's case, if the bond amount corresponds to a judgment of 55 billion, that's like $14 billion. And if it's 2.5 billion, that's around $625 million as the cost. So that's the actual cost of the bond. You don't get that back no matter what. Then on top of that, you have to collateralize those bonds. So in the Trump case, $450 million has to be collateralized, and it's usually some percentage more than the judgment, especially since interest is accruing. So it might be upwards of 120, 125% of the judgment, which means he has to collateralize $550 million, which might not sound like a lot, but it is, because real estate is generally not considered to be a safe. It's safe, but it moves a lot and it can change in price. So it's not considered to be the first choice of collateral. Obviously, cash is the best form of collateral. Securities, bonds, etc., can be used as collateral, and real estate last. But it's interesting because Trump's, uh, to the extent he has monies, whatever he has, I think most of those are in real estate. So his wealth is in real estate. So to collateralize his appeal judgment may not be easy because he may not be able to liquidate his real estate. And the problem with real estate is when it's liquidated on a fire sale, you get substantially less. So you may have a value of, and I'm making up numbers, but let's say your value is real estate is $1 billion. If you had to get rid of it in a fire sale, you might get 400, $500 million in it. So that's not the best way of posting. And if you go through an appeal and you lose, that bond can be, you can go after the bond to get your judgment enforced. And the bond company would have collateral, and they would enforce the collateral to get paid back for having that, putting up that bond. So in Trump's case, if the judgment was affirmed and let's say it's $500 billion, somebody could go out and try to look for cash, securities, could, if there's real estate, they could attach to real estate and attempt to sell the real estate, although it's not usually easy, it's costly, and it's time consuming. But those are all the things that can happen. In Musk's case, with the amount of the judgment, depending on what that turns out to be, the collateral could be substantial. And who would put up that collateral? Would it be an insurance company putting up collateral pursuant to some insurance policy? Because there's directors and officers policy. Would somebody put up cash? Would Tesla's stock be put up? It's kind of interesting. And the difference is, in Trump's case, the judgment, the monetary judgment, is what's at really the reason why a stay is needed, because Trump would not want enforcement of that judgment. But in Elon's case, the judgment just stopped him from and rescinded his stock options. So there's nothing to collect. And the reason why they're going to seek a stay is because there's going to be a huge attorney fee award, whether it be the number, as I mentioned, 625 million or 14 billion. And that's the portion they're going to want to stay. So they're going to want to post a bond so that no one can enforce that attorney's fee award and go to Tesla and say, give us $14 billion, for example. So kind of different competing interests. One is strictly riding on attorney's fees. One is strictly riding on the judgment. And again, their ability to collateralize is probably easier for Tesla and Musk as opposed to Trump, because Tesla has securities, cash they could collateralize with, and Trump's is primary real estate. So that's kind of the description of where they're at. And that's what they're trying to do right now. They're both searching out bonds. I know that Trump had a $5.6 million judgment that was raised on appeal, but to get a stay on that judgment, the 5.6, I think it's 5.6, he posted cash. But obviously, I don't think he's going to be posting $550 million in cash, nor would his attorney recommend that, because you're basically putting on a silver platter and exposing yourself, amongst other things. So that's Musk and Trump and their appeal bonds. And I'll kind of keep you apprised because it's kind of interesting how that goes. Dennis Neal, if that's the correct pronunciation. So I met with him this is MMTLP. I met with him a couple times, not met personally, but had two fairly lengthy discussions with him. I find him, along with Kristen Shaughnessy and Frank Nez, to really be supporters of the anti-short movement and supporters of the MMTLP community. So I support them all. That's my statement as to that. With regard to my arbitration, MMT arbitration, since the last reference I gave, I have filed a reply brief to the opposition to my motion, which is seeking to compel discovery. So I filed a motion because they responded to my set of interrogatories and my request for production documents with a bunch of objections and no substantive responses. I filed a motion after trying to secure that information. They filed an opposition, and I filed a reply. So without getting into the briefs, what I find is interesting is I and I've mentioned this many times before about the 11/15/2022 Fidelity document that says they can't sell MMTLP shares. Well, it was appears to be that Fidelity's position is that that's not true. And surprisingly or not surprisingly, they failed to produce that 11/15/2022 document that I've talked about for months and months and months. And in my reply, I guess they're going to see that it exists without going into detail. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting because the basic argument is, and I've referenced it before, but think about this. So MMTLP and Fidelity. So 11/15/2022 at latest, Fidelity is not selling MMTLP shares, or Ethics and Compliance is claiming not to sell MMTLP shares. We know on December 2nd, there's communication between FINRA and the SEC referring to that there's been enough communication and that the fraud has hit the kind of the news wires, and they're referring backwards in time prior to December 2nd. So they've received, I guess, information about fraud prior to December 2nd. So think about that. So we have November 15th, Fidelity says they can't sell MMTLP shares. December 2nd, referring back in time, the FINRA and the SEC says there's claims of fraud that are going on. So I don't know why between November 15th and December 2nd that Fidelity would have changed their position and started selling MMTLP shares. It wouldn't really make sense. And once December 5th happens, we know that's not possible that they could possibly have any reasonable basis for selling shares because December 5th, FINRA says they're already blue sheeting the brokers about MMAT and MMTLP. So the people at Fidelity were obviously on notice of some issue which necessitated the blue sheeting. And there was certainly someone at Fidelity, and I don't know who that was, that knew there were some shenanigans going on, and that's why they had to blue sheet. So 11/15, November 15th, Fidelity says we can't sell shares. Prior to December 2nd, FINRA and the SEC acknowledge fraud claims coming in with regard to MMTLP. December 5th, they've already done the blue sheeting, including of Fidelity. So how in tarnation, I love that word, how in tarnation could Fidelity have possibly sold, marketed, etc., any shares after December 5th? How is it possible when they said they couldn't even sell them as of November 15th? And then we have knowledge of this scam. But they did, because I bought them on the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So I find that interesting. I'm sure they will have a very interesting, contrived explanation for why they didn't produce the November 15th correspondence. Why, and I think the request was something like any communications that reflected Fidelity ceasing to sell MMTLP in 2022, something like that. Which that November 15th, 2022 communication that I've mentioned to you guys many times seems to fit, notwithstanding other stuff. So that's that fact that Fidelity didn't produce it, and I know, and I've seen recently that they're not transferring shares to AST EQ either. and there seems to be multiple brokers that are not doing it. Must have run out of shares to transfer. That's what suggests to me. But nothing's going on, of course. Next, anybody out there who has Fidelity evidence that they think would be helpful, please reach out, DM me. My arbitration hearings commence June of 2024, so about 4 months out. And if anybody has evidence that they think would be super helpful with regard to what they've experienced, please reach out. I will not turn anybody away, and if it's helpful, I appreciate you reaching out, and if I could use it, I will. Last but not least, I'm expecting a decision in the Alpine appeal fairly shortly. If you recall, that was Alpine is the prime broker for Gtii. A lot of people believe that if the prime broker loses its ability to operate, that will positively influence the stock price of Gtii. I do not know if that's true. There were oral arguments not too long ago, and I'm sure the court is now drafting an opinion and decision. I would expect that out shortly. I would also expect if Alpine loses this appeal on the issue of the injunction that was denied at the trial court level with regard to the expedited expulsion proceeding, that will negatively impact the stock. And I would be happy if it did so, although that's not financial advice. I will keep you apprised of all the bonds involving Trump Elon. On March 1st, there will be filings with regard to the attorney fee motion. I believe in the Delaware case involving Elon and Mr. Torrento, I believe. I will keep you apprised of what Trump does with regard to their appeal bond or appeal situation in New York. I've obviously will keep you apprised as to MMTLP, my arbitration. I have a whole bunch of amended rules that I want to, even though they don't apply to me, I want to let you guys know what the rules have changed with regard to arbitration before FINRA, my least favorite body. And that's about it. So everybody have a great weekend. Hope if you have questions, please throw them out. Hopefully that will have provided you some information on a bunch of topics. Everybody be well, take care, have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.